Hi there everyone, thanks for tuning in. So today's recipe is going to be stir-fried tofu with basil and a little bit of hint of chilli. It's not an expensive recipe, it's a dead easy recipe to make. Flavour wise, it's the sort of stuff that my son and my wife absolutely adore. Not so much the flavour set that I adore, but this is still a gorgeous meal. So let's crack on, let's make ourselves some stir-fried tofu and basil.
And so the first thing we need to do is to prepare our tofu. We're looking for a 400 gram gross weight firm tofu pack, such as the brand that I'm using here. And all we're going to do is put a slice in the top end and drain all the water out. Once the packet's fully drained, take and place your tofu block in the centre of a plastic chopping board or some other waterproof type chopping board, and then put a smaller one on top with a very heavy weight on top of that. I use my mortar from a mortar and pestle set. The purpose of what we're doing here is to squeeze all of the water out of the tofu so it becomes a sponge to accept all the flavour that we're going to be cooking it in. Over the very first 5 minutes, take and micro adjust the weight so that the tofu is compressed evenly. It's very easy to have the weight slightly off, and then what happens is your tofu gets malformed and you've got it squeezed down heavily on one side and not as squeezed on the other, and it gives you odd shaped tofu chunks when it comes to actually cooking them. You can see the water coming out here. This is just the first 5 minutes and that's a lot of water came out. What we then do is we take, keeping the weight in place, if you're next to your sink, take and tip up your boards and pour that water off, and now we're going to leave it for another 25 minutes so that all the water is fully pushed out of it. Whilst the tofu is on its last 25-minute compression, we can organise our garlic cloves. We're looking for 4 cloves, whether they be fresh or frozen, that's your choice. Fresh is always more flavoursome, frozen can be easier to keep a hold of, especially in times of Brexit where there's nothing on the shelves. Ginger, you have an option as well. You can use 1.5 blocks of frozen chopped ginger. You can use 4 teaspoons of ginger paste, or you can use roughly 6 centimetres of fresh root ginger, which is just over 2 inches. Again, use what you can get hold of. Frozen or fresh broccoli will work for you. Either way, we're looking for 250 grams of broccoli. If you're using frozen, you're going to have to let it defrost for a bit. At room temperature, I find it takes a couple of hours for it to defrost. And again, I'm giving you options. You can either use sugar snap peas or Mange-tout. I mostly use just sugar snap, but occasionally I mix it up and go with Mange-tout, or you can go half and half, whichever way you prefer, but it's overall 300 grams. The nice thing with both is they come in 150 gram packs, so just take and wash out your pack of peas, whichever way you went, in a sink of cold water. And then just drain them into a colander and let them dry off a little bit. Doesn't need to be long, just so the worst of the moisture drips off them. It happens very quickly. And now we can jump back to our tofu, which is probably fully pressed by now. As you can see, there's still a substantial chunk of water came out of it, so we're just going to take and we're going to get that off our chopping board before we actually press on and start cutting our tofu into our cubes. So give your tofu a quick visual inspection to see whether you compressed it correctly or whether you've got some of the sides too much over the other. If it is too much, stick it under the weight again with the weight to the opposite side and it'll even up a bit. Assuming you've got it right, very slowly and carefully cut down on the side here so that you're halving its overall height. But keep checking to either side of the tofu to make sure your knife is holding as close to the centre line as possible. Lie it back down, and then we're going to cut it in half here, and then we're going to do 2 cuts either side, and that will give us roughly 1 centimetre separations, maybe a little bit more, but it will give us roughly the ideal cube size. We're then, after we've finished these cuts either side, going to take and turn our block 90 degrees or cut it in 90 degrees, whichever is easier for you, and cut down the centre. Then halfway between that on both sides, and voila, we have roughly 1 centimetre cubes without having to think about it too much. And from there, as we aren't needing them right away, take and we're going to store our cubes in a bowl until they're required. I'm just trying to break them up here from what you can see, because they want to hold together even after you've cut them, just so you can see the size of cubes that we're getting. And that will have been long enough for the water to drain off your peas. As you see, they're still a bit glossy, still a little bit of water, but we've got enough of them so we can start chopping them now. But first things first, give them a visual inspection. It's rare, especially sugar snaps, but you can sometimes get ones which aren't the nicest on the outer skin. If it's the way you see it here, where the entire skin is no longer smooth, I tend to discard those ones. They're not so good. But anything less, I tend maybe to keep. So that one's got a little bit starting to go, so I'd probably end up keeping that one, which I did. And if it's got even less on it with that tiny little corner there starting to change shape, lose the smoothness to the skin, I definitely use them. And every other one you see there is a nice lovely smooth skin. So from here, we're looking to cut them into roughly 2 to 3 centimetre lengths. We don't want them too small, but we also don't want them too large. Easiest way to do it is grab yourself 4 up to 6 of the peas, hold them in a roughly straight line, roughly perpendicular to each other, and just chop through a few at a time, and then move them beside your chopping board and work through your pile until you're all the way there. And as with our tofu, we're just going to set it aside in a bowl until it's required. And now to our ramekin, we're looking to add 2 tablespoons of sweet chili sauce. I love sweet chili. Yum, 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 yum. Unfortunately, as I've mentioned before, wife's becoming intolerant to chili, and that means sweet chili we also need to be a bit careful of as well. And next up, into the same ramekin, we're going to add 2 tablespoons of dark soy sauce. And if you're looking to try to save the shekels, buy it in these big bulk packs rather than the small ones that you see in the supermarkets, because you get so much more bang for your buck that way. And again, to the same ramekin, we're going to be adding 1 tablespoon of lime juice. And now to a separate ramekin, we're going to be adding 1 teaspoon of dried basil. You can go a bit more with that if you want to alter the taste a little bit, but I think 1 teaspoon works best. And to yet another ramekin, we're going to be adding 2 teaspoons of light brown sugar. And we're also going to require 150 metres of vegetable stock. I like using stock cubes, in particular the OXO brand, which means it's 1 cube here, but depends on the brand you use, how much you're going to have to put in. Overall, we need 150 mils of vegetable stock, but don't add the water yet. Now, if your garlic has little brown marks on it, just as you see here, it's common with garlic, whether you're using frozen or whether you're using fresh, you can find these little brown marks. Just take your knife and slice those little bits away. They then tend not to go very deep. Occasionally they can, but they tend not to go very deep. But just slice those little bits off before we chop them. Now, if you're using frozen garlic, you can microwave it for 10-15 seconds, and that takes enough of the freeze off it to defrost it so you can chop them. If you're using fresh, obviously de-skin them first. But we're looking to finely chop these. We're not going to mince them, but we do want them finely chopped. And once they are finely chopped, we're just going to set them aside in a ramekin until we require them. Assuming you were using frozen broccoli, just take and tip out any of the water that's formed in the bottom of your bowl, because we don't want that going into the pan, because we could get some nasty splashback between the oil and the water, so we just drain that off. I don't tend to put it in a colander. Putting your hand at the bottom is more than often enough. We're then going to take and we're going to chop our broccoli down into small, nice bite-sized pieces. Again, we don't want it too large. You can see the sort of size I'm going at here. A bit larger than a floret, but not massively larger than a floret. And just as with our other ingredients, set it aside in a bowl until we're ready to start cooking. And once we are ready to start cooking, we're going to be adding 1 tablespoon of vegetable oil into a sauteuse pan like this, non-stick, or a wok, or if you don't have that, something like a saute pan, but again non-stick. And we're looking to heat our pan at a high heat until the oil starts smoking. Keep an eye on it. Once it starts smoking, you need to get the tofu in right away. But that's what you're looking for, your actual oil to start smoking before we start cooking this one. And what we're looking to do is we're looking to sear all 6 different edges of the majority of our cubes. One or two of them we might miss an edge or two, but the vast majority we're going to be able to sear them. But what we have to keep doing is move our tofu around regularly. Yes, we can leave it sitting for a few seconds just so the heat gets through to it and sears it, but then we want to move it again, and then we want to move it again. You're talking 3-4 minutes and the tofu is going to be ready if your pan's at a high enough heat. If it's a really thick based pan, it might take longer, but a sauteuse pan with its really thin base or a wok with its quite thin base, it's going to be 3 or 4 minutes. But if you had to use a heavier based pan, it is going to take a bit longer. But we're looking for all those sides to be nice and golden brown. And once ready, we take and we transfer our tofu back into the bowl we had it in to start with, because we are going to be using it again. Now this stage here will be dependent on whether you're using frozen or whether you're using fresh garlic and ginger. If you're using both fresh garlic and ginger, I want you to add 1 tablespoon of oil to your pan, and then after that's warmed up, 30 seconds or so, but after that's warmed up, I want you to add your garlic and ginger. On the other hand, if you're using frozen ginger or garlic or paste ginger, I want you to take and get a bit of kitchen roll and I want you to dry that pan before you add both of them. Cooking time remains the same, 10 to 30 seconds until they're fragrant, but the reason we're doing this is we don't want any basically ginger bombs or garlic bombs shooting up from the hot oil. So we take and we add that way round. And once your garlic has become fragrant, as I say, it can be short as 10 seconds, as long as 30 seconds, but when you can smell that garlic coming off the pan, we're then going to add our peas. And if it was frozen garlic, like you were using, we're then going to add 1 tablespoon of oil along with the peas. So we put the peas in first and immediately add in the oil. I actually meant peas and broccoli, so we're adding in the peas and the broccoli, and we're going to cook them for about 3 or 4 minutes. Now what we want here is we want the snap, the crispness to remain in our vegetables, particularly in the peas. We don't want them getting soft. So 3 to 4 minutes is really all we're talking. It can be less. What the main aim here is to get them completely warmed through but still remain crisp. We certainly don't want them any longer than the 3-4 minute mark. And you do need to move your vegetables around. If you leave them sitting there too long, you're going to burn all the bottom of them. A little bit of the charring nature is absolutely perfect with this dish. I really like a little bit of charring happening on a few edges, but we don't want to blacken everything. So stir it, move it, stir it, move it, let it set for a little bit, stir it, move it. And somewhere during this stage, whilst the peas are cooking, we're going to get on and we're going to start our noodles. So into a pan of boiling water, we want to add our noodles. Cook them to your packet instruction, but most noodles tend to be 4 minutes. And once the 3 to 4 minutes are up, we're going to add back in our tofu, we're going to add in our soy sauce mix, we're going to add in our basil, and we're going to add in our light brown sugar and our stock. Once all of those are back in, you can see the amount of steam coming off here, but once all of those are back in, we're again going to cook this just a little bit longer. Again, remember the aim is to keep some crispness to the peas so that they've got that little snap, as they're called, sugar snap peas. We want that little bit of snap left over in it. We don't want to soften everything entirely. So we're talking only 3-4 minutes. But again, we're just looking to cook down the liquids we've put in, thicken it up a bit, and get the flavours throughout. 3 minutes, 4 minutes. If you've got a really heavy base pan, it could be that little bit longer again. A lot of this dish is visual as much as it is towards the times. And whilst they're cooking away, just go in back with your tongs and give your noodles a wee move around just to make sure that nothing's stuck together. We want all our noodles nice and loose as we cook them down. And once the required time has passed for our noodles, as I say, normally 4 minutes, we're going to drain them in a colander. And then they can sit there just for a couple of minutes whilst we finish off the main dish, and then we can serve up. So we're going to serve our dish directly onto the noodles. For the first thing we need to do is we need to serve up some of our noodles into our bowls. 2 blocks like you saw there is generally perfect for 3 people. And once we've got those noodles served, our stir-fried tofu should also be ready. So we're going to take and serve that up. Now this can serve anywhere between 4 and 6 portions, just depending on how big a meal you're looking for.
So there we go. Stir-fried tofu and basil. Another, as I like it, dead easy, dead simple recipe. Dead cheap as well. Again, in all the times that we're facing with rising power bills that are just about as obscene as they possibly can be, with more rises coming, let's save some shekels. Now, this sort of food isn't normally in my wheelhouse for my flavour sets that I like. I still like this meal, but it's something the wife absolutely adores. It's something the son absolutely adores. It's the flavour sets that they get absolute joy out of. Not talk my meal down, I still like it. It's just their favourites, not mine. So, there we go. It's roasting. Better not burn myself, eh? Again, there's a roundness to the flavour. What you don't want to do is overcook your vegetables. You still want that crunch, which hopefully you heard as I was biting down. If you've overcooked them, they get soft and you lose some of the snap in the sugar snap peas. You want to keep some of that, so it's a balance of cooking it right through, getting it warmed, getting it softened somewhat, but keeping a sharpness, keeping some bite to the actual vegetables. So, thanks for watching. If this is my first video you've watched, please give me a like, give me a subscribe, and for every comments, thank you very, very much. Stay safe out there, folks. All the best to you.